Good afternoon. Welcome to the third and final topic on job attitudes, rather. Okay. We're going to be talking about organizational commitment primarily in this particular section, but other work-related attitudes as well. Organizational commitment is this notion of how much you identify with, involved with your organization. It's kind of like patriotism or school spirit, something of this nature. And clearly it's related to job satisfaction, right? Quite strongly, point 3 to point 4. However, it's not clear what the causal order is. That is, people that have high organizational commitment feel satisfied because of that commitment, or people that are satisfied in their jobs have a lot of commitment to their organization. We don't exactly know which one, but organizational commitment is more stable across time than job satisfaction tends to be. When looking at organizational commitment, we can look at three different types of commitment. An affective commitment or an emotional commitment, which is really where like patriotism comes in, right? Put your hand on your heart and salute your flag. Continuous commitment refers to things like sunk costs. So you have an organizational commitment simply because you've invested so many years there. And then finally, you've got yourself a normative commitment, which is sort of like the obligation you feel toward remaining loyal to your company just because that's what you're supposed to do from a moral perspective, something like that. So just like with job satisfaction, we've got a little image here which is going to show us, the antecedents, organizational commitment itself, and the consequences of it. And so in the next handful of slides, that's what we'll do is we'll talk about antecedents, measurement of organizational commitment, and consequences of organizational commitment. Okay? So the antecedents of organizational commitment come down to, as we see here, organizational mechanisms, individual and personality characteristics, and social factors involved in the job. Okay? So organizational mechanisms, things such as opportunities for socialization, like office Christmas parties, formal rewards, like performance bonuses, merchandise and swag. Yeah, that's great. Merchandise, stuff with the company's name on it. Even newsletters, for goodness sake. I've always had this belief, and someday I'll have to run this study, but I've felt this for a long time, is that if you want to create this kind of organization, this kind of commitment to an organization, organizational commitment, yeah, you want to increase this school spirit. I've always felt that if you get this, it's just a hypothetical study that someday I'm going to figure out a way to run. If you gave incoming freshmen, let's say, $200 worth of a gift card worth $200, and the only thing you can do with it is buy university apparel at the university bookstore. Okay, and therefore every freshman would come in with a selection of university apparel to wear. It feels to me that these students would then have higher school spirit or organizational commitment, which would lead to more, which should, okay, so antecedents, we've got swag, organizational commitment in terms of school spirit, consequences in terms of fewer withdrawal behaviors. So students, I would guess, as if ultimate factors, students that have higher school spirit are more likely to actually graduate. So I would guess that I would predict, I'm a scientist, I predict that if freshmen are given $200 worth of school spirit swag, that they will be more likely to graduate. Okay? And so it's this kind of a model that I'm going to run that theory someday. Okay? Someday I'm going to run that. But personal characteristics are related to organizational commitment as well, especially age and level of job. So clearly, entry-level jobs tend to not have, people in entry-level jobs tend not to have a lot of organizational commitment. Stress on the job is negatively related to commitment in the affective and continuous forms. And social factors like relationships with supervisors, underneath my head, and relationships with coworkers is related to affective commitment. Okay, and there's a negative relationship between role ambiguity and conflict and commitment. So clearly there is different influences in the organization. And so how do we measure it? Here is the affective, continuance, and normative commitment scales. And on this thing, in tiny little letters on my screen, we're going to measure commitment, the affective commitment, the continuous commitment, and the normative commitment in different ways. And again, we're going to have a scale of 1 to 7 for Likert scale ratings. I would be very happy to spend the rest of my career in this organization. Yeah, that's very happy, affective, the emotional component. Continuous. It would be very hard for me to leave my organization right now, even if I wanted to. How much sunk costs do you have, right? And then normative commitment. I do not feel any obligation. This is a reverse scored item, see a little R at the end. I would not feel any obligation to remain with my current employer. So this is more like, do you have a loyalty? Okay. So the consequences of organizational commitment, as we say, by far the most important one is performance, right? And it turns out that affective commitment, the emotional portion, relates to task performance and organizational citizenship behaviors. So it's stronger with organizational citizenship behaviors than it is with actual on-the-job tasks. And it makes a lot of sense. If you have school spirit and you're walking across campus and you see a piece of litter, you're going to be more likely to pick it up, right? Because picking up litter is like an organizational citizenship behavior. It's not a direct measure of your performance as a student, but it is a measure of your it's a measure of your commitment to the school, but it's a valuable part of the school. It's just not part of your regular performance. So related, but not as strongly as you might think. Withdrawal behaviors. Yeah, clearly we find the emotional portion of the commitment, the affective commitment, has been found to relate kind of strongly with absence, again in a negative direction, so that higher in affective commitment, lower in absences, right? But also affective commitment is strongly related to turnover variables like intent to search. And so the less affective commitment you have, the more likely you are to have an intent to search or to actually go out and get another job. All right? Organizational commitment related to counterproductive behaviors. Well, it turns out that frustration might be a mediator in this relationship, that those people that do not feel organizational commitment also feel frustration in their job, and it is not necessarily the organizational commitment that might be predicting the counterproductive behaviors, but the relationship. Correlation does not imply causation. All right, we had said that before. So basically, the same things that might cause low organizational commitment might also cause high frustration. And high frustration will perhaps predict counterproductive behaviors. So this particular area has not been heavily researched at this point, but it feels intuitive that there should be something there. Some other job-related attitudes, in addition to job satisfaction and organizational commitment, is job involvement. And job involvement is the extent to which you are cognitively engaged. That is, this relates to a different psychological construct or idea called flow. Maybe you've heard of flow. Flow is a state of being, originally proposed by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And flow is, by the way, related to the happiness literature. That is, a state of flow is to be in a state of flow is to be so engaged in a task that you lose sense of time, lose sense of being. You've immersed yourself so deeply. In fact, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi did some connecting this concept of flow or the flow state with feelings of happiness. That people that get into that, often people mistakenly believe that happiness comes from high engagement, parties or things like this. But that's not where true happiness comes from. True happiness comes from contentment, and contentment is something you feel when you get into the flow state. And so if you do in fact have high job involvement, it's slightly different than flow, but it's really the same idea. You really feel your negative attitudes go away, your physical health increases, your psychological stress decreases. So job involvement absolutely has all kinds of impacts on these other behaviors related to organizational citizenship behaviors and task performance, more so for women than for men. But this job involvement is really an understudied kind of a thing. If you aren't familiar with the conception of flow, you should look this up online. I'm sure there's a good article on Wikipedia. Oh, all right. I'm sure there's a good one on there. But if you're not familiar, I recommend looking it up. I think it's a fascinating concept. Work centrality is an attitude, work-related attitude, is the importance that work plays in your life. It's kind of like when you're doing the 20 statements test. Perhaps you remember the 20 statements test where you just say, I am, and fill in the blank with 20 words. Okay. I am tall. I am a father. I am a husband. Whatever you might want to add in there. At what point, does your occupation fit? Okay. And clearly, if you're going through the 20 statements test and I am, and you put your occupation as the number one thing on that list, well, you're high in work centrality, right? So people that are high in work centrality tend to have higher organizational commitment. Okay, these are related to each other. Work centrality is positively related to salary, positively related to number of promotions, positively related to career satisfaction, and if I had to make a guess, work centrality is also positively correlated with the word above, workaholism. And workaholism is the thing that creates higher salaries, more promotions, etc. Okay? Perceived organizational support, or POS. Where I come from, POS doesn't mean perceived organizational support. Now you look that one up on Wikipedia, see what you find. So perceived organizational support, however, is the degree to which an employee thinks that the organization values them, cares about them as a person. And so we find that the antecedents to this particular attitude are, if you view the organizational procedures as fair, organizational justice, if you have a lot of supervisor support, if you feel that your rewards and job conditions are good, you'll have high perceived organizational support. And if you have high perceived organizational support, you'll have decreased withdrawal behaviors. And POS is negatively related with politics of workplace. So there are other attitudes in addition to the big two. Now, they stick this in this chapter, and it's a little bit kind of an odd, in this topic, it's a little bit odd place for me to find it, but here it is, okay? So, emotions in work. So, as soon as you go to work, often what we find is that we're being required to regulate our emotions. We're being required to hide who we are and what we're feeling. And so we find that emotional regulation can be multiple. Number one, you can amplify. You can fake pleasant emotions, smiling more often. And this can actually lead to job satisfaction. And that's not a surprise. I mean, that's what the James Lang theory of emotions was all about. The act of smiling leads to happiness. And if James Lang says the act of smiling leads to happiness, why wouldn't fake smiling at work lead to higher job satisfaction? I mean, it just seems to be a logical thing. But emotional suppression, however, that is the requiring you to hide emotions like anger or jealousy, can lead to job dissatisfaction. Okay? And so here's an interesting concept, emotional labor. And that is the amount of effort, planning, and control that employees need to give to create the organizationally desired emotions. And obviously, this is particularly true for service jobs, like the manager at McDonald's. I'm going to give them some credit. they deserve a raise for the amount of emotional labor that they must exhibit to not just the customers, but also to, the employees. And so finally, we can talk about this notion of emotional dissonance. In the same way we had cognitive dissonance, remember cognitive dissonance was a situation where the attitudes that you have and the behaviors you have exhibited do not match each other. They're out of balance. We feel dissonance. Dissonance is a bad thing. So emotional dissonance is the state of having a discrepancy between your true emotions and the one you need to express. Having emotional dissonance for a long period of time can lead to stress, burnout, and poor performance. So we find in an interesting way that the strength of the employees' smiles predicted customer satisfaction and customer service ratings, but fake smiles, fake emotion displays lead to less positive customer impressions. So when employees smile and mean it, it leads to positive customer service, customer satisfaction. But when they fake a smile, customers know it's a fake smile and respond accordingly. All right, so that's what we got for this topic, and I've had it for the day. So I will see you, well, for me tomorrow, for you, I don't know, next week maybe? Don't know. We'll see you the next time, though.